Hi, I'm Marty Nemko. This time I want to talk about shopping smart. Really, Amazon has revolutionized shopping. First thing I do for most items is I will either Google it and the word reviews, or simply go to Amazon and read the reader reviews, giving that more credibility than even the expert reviews, because I think the experts are very often less in touch with how real average users rather than aficionados use the products. So I'll do that first, and then I end up buying most of my items based, are top ranked. It doesn't have to necessarily be number one or number two, but I'm looking at the number one, two, or three ranked products, and then looking to see which individual, for my individual purposes, are a better fit. And then I'll either buy it on Amazon, because they've got so many different vendors that sell through Amazon that I often can get the best price. Or if I have questions about that, I'll go to eBay. And very often, especially for items imported from China and very low price items, you can often get those better price and a different kind of and bigger selection through eBay. So that's how I buy most items. I want to talk a little bit about the biggest items we spend, which is housing, higher education, and cars, because those end up being obviously critical. Housing. I really, nobody has a crystal ball. They say he who lives by the crystal ball eats broken glass, but there is something askew when, in most coastal areas, the price of a house is even two doctors can't afford to buy it. So that seems to me that it's built on a house of cards. No matter how many rich Chinese invest and buy up real estate, somehow there's something wrong here. And I think especially since there is certainly many people who think that our national debt is unsustainable, that it is going to be a house of cards. And so I'm not a big fan of home ownership. There's always been the presumption that if you buy, things will go up. And I'm not convinced, although that has certainly been true for the last number of decades. I'm a little less sanguine about it now. So I don't think rental is such a foolish idea, although rents have gone way up as well. But I think the smart money on rental is something that is going to make many people who are security conscious quake a bit. And that is, there is an enormous difference between the price of a rental in a nice, quote, nice neighborhood and one that's called a, quote, dodgy neighborhood. And yet the actual risk of your being attacked or home invasions or whatever is actually very small if you just exert the normal precautions of keeping things locked, not walking out in sexy clothes in the middle of the night and strolling. The cost difference and in turn the improvement in your quality of life is enormous if you're willing to consider a not great neighborhood. And especially in many public school districts these days, even if you're not living in a, quote, great neighborhood, very often there's open enrollment subject to racial parity, so that you're able to have your kid go to a public school that is not in your immediate, quote, dodgy area, and thereby save a fortune on private school. That's all I want to say about housing. Now I want to talk a little bit about higher ed. There is no reason to believe, and there is good data to support it, that it is not worth spending the big money on higher ed. Now, I will take an exception. I think that places that are the ultimate designer labels, Harvard, Stanford, Princeton, Yale, even maybe Berkeley, because Berkeley's public is a little less expensive, may be worth the money, and maybe even UCLA. But certainly paying for second-tier private colleges, the UCLA's, the USC, Syracuse's, Tulane's, Northwesterns, etc., in my judgment, are not worth the money. It's going to matter. The reason that those kids tend to do well is because they're the brightest, most connected, and most driven to begin with, not so much because of the value added that the college provides. So I am a big fan of, if you can possibly convince your kids, I'm assuming that mainly it's adults, not kids watching this, that you convince your kid that even if they worked hard and did well in high school, that they'd be very wise to spend their first year or 2 years in a community college, which costs very, very little, and the instruction paradoxically is better because the professors are hired and promoted based on teaching, not research productivity. And even many community colleges have honors programs and more rigorous courses. And even if you are the big fish in the less selected pond, you're going to get a lot of benefits from that. Not only your GPA, but professors will love having a bright, motivated kid there. And then you can transfer to perhaps a more prestigious college than you otherwise could, having saved, as a freshman, having saved a fortune. That's what I want to say about higher ed. Now I want to say about cars. It is well known, and I agree with it, that the smart money normally is in buying a 3 to 4 year old car, especially Toyotas, which are by far the most reliable cars, especially those made in Japan. I've been looking at the Consumer Reports reviews, and for example, the Camrys, now that they're made in somewhere in the south of the United States, are not as reliable as they used to be. As far as I know, the Prius is still made in Japan, and I've owned 2 Priuses and a Prii now, and they're unbelievably reliable. I've had tons of Toyotas, all of which have been made in Japan over my entire lifetime. They've averaged 250 to 300,000 miles, and I have sold them all while still being in perfectly fine running condition. They are a remarkable company. I'm not normally a brand loyal person, but I really do think that Toyotas, especially those made in Japan, are the premier cars in the world. And any attempt to gain more status by getting a Mercedes or a Jaguar or a BMW is really foolish, because there's nothing prestigious about sitting on the side of the road waiting for the tow truck, because those cars are less reliable than Toyotas. Of course, Lexuses are also extremely reliable, but they're much more expensive. And it's also certainly nothing sexy about having to take your car in for the much more maintenance that BMWs and Mercedes and Jaguars and the like require, compared to the Toyotas that I can't believe how little is required. They may say you need to bring it in for tune-ups every 30,000, but I have basically done no tune-ups, for no good reason. I just arbitrarily at the 100,000 mile mark bring it in one time, and then at 200,000 mile mark. But other than that, I just change the oil every 5,000 or 10,000, depending upon what the manufacturer requires at that time. And by doing that, I have an incredibly reliable car. You buy a 3 or 4 year old Toyota, and you would say 30 or 40 or 50,000 miles on it. You still have 200,000 of safe miles, reliable miles probably there for you, and you've saved a fortune over your lifetime. You will have saved a fortune on the cost of cars. And I think that is all I want to say. That's the world's shortest course in shopping smart. And I thank you for watching, and if you're so inclined to subscribe to my channel or share this video or simply like it, I would welcome that. Also, your comments and questions. I do tend to answer reasonable questions in the comments section of this. In any case, thank you for watching. I am Marty Nemko.